It's a new year, and with it comes new laws in Iowa, and they're impacting everything from gun regulations to Medicaid coverage and how your personal data is handled. Iowa's News Now's Nick El-Haj breaks down some of the most notable changes taking effect today.
Nicole, more than 180 laws were passed in Iowa in 2024, and while many of those already took effect in July, several key measures are taking effect today as we ring in the new year. As Iowa enters an 8th consecutive year with the GOP in charge, the state is bolstering its control over gun control, with House File 2556 now giving Iowans the power to sue local governments that pass ordinances conflicting with state firearm laws.
What that reminds me of is a concern that the state legislature has for some of the cities that are more liberal leaning, that are basically going contrary to what the Republican controlled legislature would be interested in. So if you're talking about gun rights, it's no surprise that a city like Iowa City, which is a very liberal city, that they may be inclined to pass restrictive regulations or laws regarding gun rights.
Under the law, cities could face fines ranging from $100 to $500 per day for unintentional violations and up to $2,500 for intentional ones.
And so now this is basically putting some teeth into it, saying, well, look, if the city goes ahead and does something like this, you're going to be able to sue them, and it's going to cost the city some money. So you hit them where it hurts, which is in the pocketbook.
Another new law focuses on consumer privacy, now allowing Iowans to confirm if their personal data is being collected, request a copy, and even delete it.
It's something that legislatures are starting to take more attention to in terms of protecting or allowing consumers to sort of be active in terms of saying, well, who's got my data and who's gathering this kind of a thing? We'll have to see if that makes any difference one way or another.
UI professor Tim Hagel says while the law addresses consumer concerns, it's part of a broader balancing act.
And again, as always, there has to be a balance. You don't want it to be so, give the consumer such power that it makes it impossible for companies to do business in a particular state. But on the other hand, you want consumers to be able to at least have some sense of, if they're interested, some sense of, who's gathering their data, what they're doing with that data.
And big changes are coming to Medicaid postpartum coverage. Eligible new mothers will now receive 12 months of care instead of just 60 days, but fewer people will qualify due to tightened income limits.
And I would hope that the legislature has looked at that data and said, well, these other folks maybe have other sources that they can turn to, or they don't need it as much.
Critics say hundreds of moms and their babies will be kicked off their coverage under the new law. But Hagel says lawmakers can always go back to the drawing board if they have to.
We'll see how this works out. Sometimes a new law takes place and it seemed like maybe a good idea at the time. And if all of a sudden it's just not working out for one reason or another, then the legislature can always come back and change it.
And lawmakers will be headed back to the state capitol in less than 2 weeks from now. The new legislative session starts on January 13th. Reporting in studio in Kalhaj, Iowa's News Now.
Thanks, Nick. Another new law taking effect today cuts to your state income taxes. Governor Reynolds signed Iowa's new 3.8% flat tax rate into law back in May as part of a plan to give money back to Iowans following a surplus in state revenue. But recent budget predictions for 2026 do show a projected shortfall under those tax cuts, meaning lawmakers will either have to dip into reserve funds or spend less in the future. Another new law starting today, stores selling glass smoking pipes now face a 40% excise tax, a $1,500 annual permit fee, and new rules to track customers' names and ages. We told you about this last night. Shop owners say they're waiting for more details on enforcement, but many say they're worried the new law could force them to shut down.